Good afternoon, everyone. Stacy Alcorn here. Thank you for joining us today for our first virtual first-time homebuyer seminar. My name is Stacy Alcorn, and I'm the CEO of Lair Realty Partners. And today we've put together an awesome program for everybody watching. Basically, I'm going to go through the process of buying a home. I will talk about briefly that we do a lot of business in both Massachusetts and New Hampshire. We also do a little bit in Connecticut and Rhode Island and Maine. The processes are pretty much the same regardless of which state you're in, but there are nuances. So for example, in New Hampshire, when you do an offer on a property, that's basically your purchase and sale agreement as well. Whereas in Massachusetts, it's more of a two-step process that you do an offer on a property, you get it accepted, and then usually you'll get an attorney involved to help you prepare a purchase and sale agreement. So there's certain little nuances, which I'll talk about along the way, but for the most part, the process is going to be the same regardless of the state that you're buying in. So I'm going to dive right in because I'm going to start with about a 20-minute presentation to talk about the process, and then I have a lineup of great panelists and speakers for you guys to learn from today. Well, I want to get this. Some housekeeping that I want to talk about before we talk today is that, first of all, there's going to be a difference. Some of the people watching the program are watching live. So if you signed into a Zoom webinar and you're watching live, then you can ask questions. So there's a little chat box where you can type in questions, and a Q&A box. You can put your questions in there. And the best time to ask a question is when the particular speaker you want to talk to is up. This is a 2-hour program, and not all of our speakers are staying till the end of the program. So if you have questions, like if it's about a mortgage question, you can ask while the mortgage speaker is talking. If it's about legal, you can talk while our attorney's here. If you are watching this program recorded, which most of you are going to be watching a recorded version of this program, then you can always just reach out to your Lair agent and ask any questions, because this is what we do all day, every day. And I can guarantee you that if by chance your Lair agent can't answer the question, they will point you in the right direction to get you all of your answers met. Last but not least, after I do my presentation, I'm going to introduce you to some amazing people who we do business with on a regular basis. Real estate is a team sport. And what I'm going to tell you about the people that we brought on to today's program is that, first of all, by law, we can't make you use them. So that's my first piece that I want to say is that we can't make you use anybody that we recommend. However, there's a reason they're on the program. I've now been in real estate for 20 plus years. Your real estate agent has spent their career vetting great teammates. So listen wisely when your team member, your real estate agent tells you that they recommend particular players for you to reach out to. But again, you're never going to be required to use the people that we recommend. So with that, I want to dive into today's program. Our panelists today, which I'm going to have on in about 20 minutes, we'll start our panelist discussion. But we have representatives from Ross Mortgage and Citizens Bank. So they're both lenders, both mortgage companies, going to talk about their products for first-time home buyers. We have a representative here from Humboldt, who's going to talk about moving and storage, Tiger Home Inspections, to talk about the home inspection process, and then our friends from Army and Roche, who are going to talk a little bit about the legal side of doing a transaction. So we'll come back to each of them in a few minutes. A little bit about our company. Lair Realty Partners is 6 years old, and we help about a little more than 3,000 families a year buy and sell real estate. We are the largest independent real estate brokerage in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and growing. We have 35 offices throughout Mass and New Hampshire, and continuing to expand. So The reason I like to talk for a few minutes about who we are and where we come from is because what makes our company a little bit different than most companies is that we pride ourselves on going out and finding the best real estate agents. Here's what I'll tell you. Not all real estate agents are cut the same. There are great real estate agents. There are mediocre real estate agents, and there are bad real estate agents out there. And at Lair Realty Partners, our differentiator is that we've gone out over the last 6 years and we say our job is to find the lions of real estate. Lions are strong, they are negotiators of difficult terrain, and they are true protectors of their clients. And it's our job at Lair as a management team to go out and find those real estate agents. So you are working with the creme de la creme of real estate agents when you choose a Lair agent. So I mentioned a few minutes ago that real estate is a team sport. There's tons of different players involved in the transaction. Of course, the real estate agent who kind of oversees everything. They're kind of like the coach. They oversee all the different players. But then you have your mortgage inspection, attorney, your appraiser, insurance, mover, storage. And then there's also other team players that potentially sometimes have to come in and help with the transaction. So if you're doing a condo transaction, we might be dealing with the condo association. Sometimes there's pest issues. So pest inspection is not uncommon. Septic inspections, which by the way, if you're in Massachusetts, there's a Title V law which requires that all septics are inspected, and typically that's done by the seller, and you're given a Title V inspection prior to closing on the property. In Massachusetts, we have fire inspections. I told you I'd let you know of nuances throughout the presentation, nuances between Mass and New Hampshire. New Hampshire does not have required septic inspections. New Hampshire does not have required fire inspections, whereas in Massachusetts, that is typically a requirement of closing. Sometimes we have to get water tested or structural engineers. There is a myriad of potential team players in any potential buy-side transaction. So next I want to talk about the fact that when you work with a Lair agent, you're working with a realtor. Not every real estate agent is a realtor, but the agents at Lair Realty are realtors. There's a difference between realtors and agents who do not subscribe to the realtor organization. Number one, we take it very seriously as realtors that we have a fiduciary responsibility. So when you work with a realtor, their fiduciary responsibility is to you. So that means you have an expert who is looking out for your best financial interests, an expert who's contractually bound to do everything in their power to protect you. Another reason why you should work with a realtor, they help find you the right home beyond just looking at like the square footage and baths. So what I like to equate this to is that if this is your first home, then you've probably never been on a tour of real estate. Maybe you've lived in 1 or 2 homes throughout your entire life. But as real estate agents, we are in hundreds of homes on a monthly basis because we're out looking at properties. So what that means is that we know what to look for when it comes to a piece of real estate. It is not unusual for a real estate agent to notice, for example, that in the basement of a property you're looking at, that there's a water line on the concrete in the basement, which might tell us that there could potentially have been water in the basement. So when you work with a real estate professional, they know the things that they should be looking out for and letting you know about. The other reason you want to work with a realtor is that they understand the value of real estate. Now, oftentimes this comes in if you're thinking about selling a property. Of course, you want to get the highest and best price for the property. But one of the things I'm going to show you in a few minutes is that an awesome buyer agent, an incredible buyer agent, is also going to do a market analysis on any house you're looking to buy. So you find that dream home you want, a great buyer agent is going to go back to their computer and do the research and come back to you and say, hey, we know the property is listed at 400,000, but I pulled all the comps, and what I believe that property is worth is 380,000. That's the value of a great real estate agent. A great real estate agent is a great negotiator. I mean, the fun part is going out and finding the property, but you are going to want to work with a great real estate agent to help you in the negotiating process. Your realtor is your advocate and can bring an objective voice to a very subjective situation. I can't stress enough. I always tell people who are out looking at real estate, sometimes buyers will call on a for sale by owner property because they think they're going to get a better deal if somebody's listed their house on their own. And perhaps sometimes that is the case, perhaps. But there is a whole myriad of potential legal issues that you can get yourself into. Not only that, you have nobody fighting for you, nobody making sure the value of the property is right. Nobody that's going through saying, hey, here's some red flags that you might want to be aware of on this property. The big difference between a realtor and all the other real estate agents that practice real estate is that as realtors, we subscribe to a code of ethics, which just basically says that when you work with a realtor, you're partnering with a professional who operates according to a strict code of ethics. In place for over 100 years, the Realtor Code of Ethics ensures that consumers work with a realtor and that they're treated professionally and ethically in all matters. So our goal is to help you find and close on your ideal home. I want to talk quickly about the fact that as we're doing this presentation, we are still in the middle of a quarantine with COVID-19. And sometimes buyers say, well, can I still go look at real estate? And the answer is yes, in most towns. That's not every town. There are some towns that you cannot go look at real estate, but for 99% of real estate, you can actually still go look at real estate. As well, real estate agencies like us have gone above and beyond to make it as easy as possible and as safe as possible for you to still buy real estate. So many agents are doing virtual tours, so you don't even have to leave your home to go look at the property that you're interested in. And even if you do want to go out and actually see the bricks and mortar of that property, real estate agents are practicing safely, wearing face masks, hand sanitizer, cleaning the area. So the answer is yes, you could still go look at real estate. And up until that point, you can find out a lot. You can get a lot of the paperwork out of the way virtually through Zoom meetings, etc. So our goal is to help you find and close on your ideal home at the best price in the shortest amount of time with the most favorable terms and with as little hassle as possible. The way we do that is that we can help you find homes that are listed in MLS. We can help you find for sale by owner or new homes. Oftentimes, even in today's market, because one of the questions people ask us, are homes still selling? And the answer is absolutely yes. And not only that, as a buyer, right now, you absolutely have an opportunity to buy real estate without the outrageous bidding wars. At the rate we were going before COVID-19 hit, if you were looking at homes in Massachusetts or New Hampshire, there was a very high likelihood you were going to have to participate in a bidding war. That meant that when we hosted open houses, there would be 30, 40, 50 groups that would come through the open house. And then it was not uncommon to have 10 or 20 offers on every property. That was not favorable for a first-time home buyer because that meant for you to get the property, you were going to have to way outbid everybody else on the property. Now, houses are still selling even in the market right now, but typically you're not up against 10 other people bidding on the same property. So typically it's a more normalized market right this moment. By the way, we don't predict that forever. What our prediction is that June and July will be spring market where there'll be inventory, but there'll also once again potentially be those bidding wars. So the different ways that a great real estate agent is going to go out and find you property is they're going to do way more than just sticking you on an online home search. I mean, that's the minimum. We're going to make sure every day you're emailed new properties to go look at. But also they're going to search for the for sale by owners, new homes in the market. We're going to go out to our fellow layer agents, 550 of them, and find out what our fellow agents have coming on the market. We're going to do special marketing campaigns out to the marketplace, direct marketing to homeowners who've not yet listed their property, doing buyer flyers in targeted neighborhoods, and we have awesome social media campaigns. So if you've been thinking about buying a home, but you haven't pulled the trigger because you haven't seen the house you want on, say, Zillow, that doesn't mean that you should not start the process. You should call your real estate agent and start the process, because there's a good chance that agent can go out and find the actual house you want through a social media campaign, a marketing campaign, and talking to high-performing listing agents in your marketplace. So the next piece that is important, I mean, the home search is fun, like going on the computer, doing some virtual showings, maybe even going out and looking at some real estate. That's all fun. But before you get your hopes up, the first step you should be taking, once you have an idea of what you're looking for, the next step before you look at real estate is find out what you can get pre-approved for. So we encourage every first-time home buyer, before you go look at real estate, go sit with a mortgage professional. They're going to want your pay stubs, bank statements, tax returns. They're going to pull your credit. The reason you want to do that at the start is because we've seen so many buyers that get so excited, they find their dream home, and then they find out too late that they can't qualify. I would also urge you that if you were qualified for a mortgage 4 months ago or 2 months ago, you were qualified for a mortgage 2 months ago, there have been a lot of lending changes over the last 60 days. I would urge you to call your mortgage person and make sure your mortgage still works. With the COVID-19, there have been lots of changes to underwriting guidelines. So you want to make sure all qualifications still work for you. Some of the stuff that we do as part of our strategy, we do make sure that you're pre-approved with a great loan officer. I'm going to go through some of this in a few minutes. I want to dig a little deeper into the mortgage piece of it and what the mortgage originator is going to be looking for. The amount you qualify for is going to depend greatly on how much money you have down, your ability to pay the monthly mortgage, the closing costs associated with your transaction, and your credit. Those are the 4 things that impact your ability to qualify and buy a house. The one piece I always tell first-time buyers to think about is, just because you can qualify for a mortgage payment doesn't mean that you should go with that mortgage payment. For example, if you're paying $1,500 a month rent right now, and you feel like you don't have any extra spending money above that $1,500 a month rent, yet your mortgage originator tells you can qualify for $2,500 a month, you should probably not go out and buy a home with a $2,500 mortgage payment. Granted, there are some tax incentives to buying a house, but you want to make sure you feel comfortable. Under normal regulations, this just tells you that in general, a lender is going to allow your mortgage payment to be 25 to 28% of your gross monthly income. You see at the top there. And that also your total debt to income, meaning if you take your mortgage payment plus all your other monthly bills, like your minimum credit card payments, student loans, your car payment, if you take all of those plus your mortgage payment, that typically shouldn't be much higher than 38% of your monthly gross income. Those numbers change a little bit depending on what your credit is and depending what mortgage program and how much down payment you're putting down. All of that will vary slightly. Some things that you should not do when you are thinking about buying your first house. If you're in the middle of buying a house, you should absolutely not change jobs unless it's absolutely necessary. You should not go from having a paycheck job to becoming self-employed because that hurts your qualification. You should not buy a car, truck, or van. Do not use charge cards excessively. I always tell people, don't go out and you see those commercials where they tell you can get your furniture, like a Bernie and Phil's, that you can get your furniture right now and not pay for it for 2 years. That can actually have a detrimental impact on your ability to qualify for a mortgage. So do not do that. Don't not tell your loan officer about debts that you have. So be as candid as possible with your loan officer so that you can avoid having any last minute issues on your mortgage approval. Do not create inquiries into your credit. That means don't go out and shop for new debt. Do not make large deposits. Do not change bank accounts, and do not co-sign for a loan for anyone. All those things can have a negative impact. Going back to the home selection process, once you've had your pre-approval, now you know the price range that you could feel comfortable looking in. Some of the stuff to think about when you're out looking at real estate: scout the neighborhood out. I mean, there's a million things. I say if you know roughly the area you want to live in, drive by there all different times of day or night. Look at how other homes in the area are maintained. I always like to share the example that the house that I live in, I moved into about 8 years ago, and I didn't realize that there was a train track. Literally, like, it's very loud. And because I hadn't been to the property enough times to realize that there was a train regularly running through the area. So those are the kinds of things you can learn by just spending time in the neighborhood. Look for things like access to major thoroughfares, listen for noise, like I mentioned, railways, public areas, schools, smell the air for adjacent commerce or agriculture. I can't stress this enough. We had a home buyer who bought a property a few years ago, bought it in the middle of winter, and called up upset because not only did the agent not realize it, but the buyer did not realize that there was a pig farm nearby. And they didn't realize it until the middle of spring. So spend time there, research what's in the area, check with local civic, police, fire, and school officials to find out information about the area. One great one that people often ask us about is sex offender lists. Call your local police department and ask about registered sex offenders in the marketplace. Research things like soil and water. You can go down to town hall and ask for a map of your property once you've zoned in on a particular property. Look at traffic patterns around the area during different times of the day and drive the area to your work. Find out if the neighborhood is near parks, churches, recreation, shopping, theaters, restaurant, public transportation, schools, all the stuff you might care about. Also, a good idea is that if you're going to be raising kids, that you check out what's happening in the schools. We have access, your LAIR agent has access to the school reports for every community in New England. So do your research beforehand. This is less of a concern right now, but our expectation is that open houses are going to start up eventually again. And one of the things you want to think about is that anytime you go to an open house, it is a very good idea to make sure that you let the agent hosting that open house know that you are already represented by an agent. So that otherwise you don't want that agent to spend a great deal of time selling you the property, because then you may be committed to having to pay that agent to represent or to sell you the property. We don't want to get you into a situation where you might have committed yourself to paying two different agents. So always when you attend an open house, just let them know you're already represented, you're there to take a look at the home. Also a good idea to give your agent a heads up when you're heading to open houses so that your agent can also give a heads up to anybody hosting the open house. Keep notes on every home. A little bit on offers and contracts. Once you find the house that you want, your agent is going to help you make an offer on the property. I will note that your agent is also going to do a great deal of due diligence prior to making that offer. So typically they're going to call the town hall, the tax department, make sure there's no type of legal issue on the property. They'll also typically do a market analysis just to see what the value of the property comes up. Once you have put an offer in and gone through the negotiating process, by the way, when you get your offer accepted or not, sometimes you'll put an offer in and the seller rejects your offer. These are the areas where a great real estate agent comes in handy, because a great real estate agent, one of the tools a great agent has in their pocket is that they are great negotiators, and they have different ways that they can negotiate a great outcome for you. But once you have your offer accepted, the next piece to think about is the home inspection. We do have a representative from Tiger Home Inspection. I think 2 of them are here today that we'll talk to in a few minutes. But the home inspection is so key. I always say, like, the home inspection is for a buyer just to let you know about how your home or potential home operates. Like, the inspection is not there for you to necessarily negotiate a price down, although sometimes that does happen if there's serious problems. But really the purpose of the home inspection is to educate you on this house, which is the biggest financial decision you'll make in a lifetime. To educate you about that property, but also to let you know if there's any serious problems. Like, are you going to have to update the roof in the next 24 months? Those are the kinds of things that you want to have an idea of what kind of cash outlays might you have to make fairly soon. I always say there's no such thing as pass or fail on a home inspection. Your home inspector is not there to tell you like you're overpaying for a property or that you have a good deal on a property, because really they don't know. They're there to tell you the mechanical systems. What does the roof look like? Are the mechanical systems working? We'll talk to a home inspector in a few minutes so you can get an idea of other things that they're checking for you. After the inspection looks good, sometimes you'll go back and renegotiate. If you find out at the inspection that there's a great deal of issues with the property that you didn't know of going into it, your agent might use that as an opportunity to go back and renegotiate the transaction for a better deal. Also, you have an option to get out of the contract. So there's a contingency in your contract that basically says that you have usually 10 days to do an inspection. And if for any reason you don't want the property, that you can back out and get your deposit back. It's always a bad idea, in my opinion, to not have a home inspection contingency. When the market was very hot last year, there were a lot of buyers who opted not to do a home inspection because they felt it hurt their ability to get their offer accepted. Like I said, we're not seeing that in this market right this moment, but we do expect that that could happen again in June or July. But people were removing their inspection contingencies in hopes of getting an offer accepted. Very bad idea, because really it is the biggest purchase you'll ever make in your lifetime, and you don't know if there's something underlying. And I would say oftentimes it's not that a seller is selling you a property that they know there's some kind of big issue with it and they're trying to pass it off on you. More likely, sometimes the seller doesn't even realize that there's a problem. But with most contracts, once the inspection is done, the transaction moves forward. A second deposit is made on the property, which is credited towards your down payment. Once that all happens, we create a purchase and sale agreement. Usually that process changes slightly depending on what state you're in. So in New Hampshire, for example, the original offer becomes the purchase and sale agreement. So typically you're not going to have a separate contract, whereas in Massachusetts, a separate contract is created, and usually that involves an attorney. Also, attorneys are involved with making sure the title is clean on the property, doing a title exam and title search. And we have an attorney who's going to talk to you guys in a few minutes about that. Just want to see, it looked like we had a question. And somebody just asked where they could find a recorded version of this webinar. We're going to put this on the Lair Realty website. I also believe that you'll be able to still go into that same Zoom link and register, and it'll then just show you the recording of the property. But we will make sure anybody that's on the live program gets an email recording of today's program as well. Let's see, looks like we might have, let's see. Once you have signed the purchase and sale agreement, then we make sure everything gets sent to your bank, your mortgage originator, because even though you were pre-approved, doesn't mean that you're definitely getting the money to buy this property, because now the bank wants to make sure it appraises for whatever you're paying for it. So there is an appraisal is the next step. That's where the bank sends out an unbiased professional to make sure the value of the property is there. So for example, if you're buying a house for $500,000 and the appraisal comes in at $450,000, potentially you have an issue. You may not be able to buy that property, especially if you're putting a low down payment. So if you're putting a huge down payment, let's just say you're buying it for $500,000 and you're putting $100,000 down, then potentially you could still buy the property if you really wanted to. But the appraisal is there to protect the bank. It also protects you as well. Once you get your mortgage commitment, and by the way, I'm kind of chopping this down for the sake of time. There's probably a million other little steps in between that I didn't even go into. So for example, if you're buying a condo, typically you have condo docs to review. If the home inspector comes up with issues, and you might have to have a structural person come in and determine if there's structural issues to a house. There's a million little ways that each step of this process, which I've dummied down for today to make it as simple as possible to show you just kind of an overview of the process, because I really want to get you in front of the panelists who are going to speak today. But there's a million little ways that each of these processes can turn into another issue and another team member that has to come in and help navigate through a different piece of the transaction. Next is your loan approval. All I want to say about the mortgage approval is it's really important to, number one, read it. Also, your real estate agent will make sure you understand that when you get to that purchase and sale contract, you have a date by which you have to let the other party know if you can't get mortgage approval. The mortgage contingency date is one of the most important dates of your contract, because it is the last date by which you can get out of the contract and still potentially get your deposit money back. So you can't take that date lightly. Once you get your approval, read it carefully and make sure, because each mortgage approval has a list of conditions, and you want to make sure that you can meet the conditions. So if you get a mortgage approval and you're so excited because you're going to be able to move forward and buy the house you want, but there's a difficult condition. So for example, you get a mortgage approval, but it's conditioned upon you paying off a student loan that has a $70,000 balance. To many buyers, that would be the same as not getting an approval at all, because you would not be able to come up with the $70,000 to pay off the student loan. So before you get too excited about that loan approval, make sure that you read through the conditions and that you feel comfortable that you can meet any of the conditions that the bank requires you to meet prior to closing. We do have a great person who is going to talk to us today about the moving process. All through this, while there's a million little puzzle pieces coming together as you get ready to buy your house, from the mortgage team, the attorney, getting insurance, like all these little pieces are lining up. While that's all happening, the other piece that you're looking at is packing and getting ready for a move into your property. So we have a team here that's going to talk about packing and moving and storage. And then I always like to include just a little bit of information about some of the stuff you could do if you have kids and you're moving. So like to get them excited for the new property, like having a scrapbook ready for their new home, visiting their new school, church, park, help your kids invite new friends over to the new home, let your kids choose a favorite restaurant in the area, encourage your kids to send letters about their new home to their friends from their old town, and involving your kids in group sports and activities like the ones they used to participate in. So once all of this has kind of come together, and again, I've cut out some pieces just in the sake of time, like before you get to this point, you need to get an insurance binder and things like that. Typically there's a final water reading. If there's any oil tank, then typically there's measurements to make sure that the seller is credited for any oil that's left there. So I've cut out some of the simple pieces along the way, just in the interest of time. But once all of the pieces have come together, you'll have an opportunity to walk through the property prior to the closing. The purpose of that is to make sure you're still buying what you think you're buying. So you get an opportunity to walk through, make sure the seller got all of their stuff out of the property, that the heat's still working, kind of walk the perimeter of the property, make sure there's no big issues in the landscaping that weren't there before. But basically the idea of that walkthrough is to make sure that you are buying what you agreed to buy from the seller and that nothing changed in the 30 or 60 days it took to close. Finally, there's going to be a closing, and a closing is where all the parties come together. By the way, there's a lot of changes happening in this now, where you might not actually attend a closing with a buyer and a seller due to all the changes happening right now with COVID-19, but somewhere all the parties are going to sign documents. So the attorneys prepare a HUD settlement statement, where that settlement statement will tell you all the money that you need to come up with to close. The sellers will get a check, the buyers bring a check, everybody signs, and on that day typically, or the next day, there's a deed transfer, and that is when the registry of deeds, a deed gets recorded at the registry, which makes you the new owner of the property. I do like to talk very quickly about 3 super important forms. Beyond the contract and the purchase and sale agreement, that's all of course important, but there's 3 other forms that are always super important in a transaction. One is the agency disclosure. By law in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, wherever you're buying, by law, when an agent meets you for the first time, they have to disclose who they're working for. Are they representing a buyer? Are they representing a seller? This is not a contract, but by law, we have to get you to sign it. It basically just lets you know that, hey, if we work together, I'd be representing you. Or sometimes the reason this is important is, like, if you go to an open house and decide to work with that agent from that open house could be working for the seller. And you need to know who that agent is representing, because it's going to potentially impact how they help negotiate for you. The second is the lead paint disclosure. If you have children that are under the age of 6, you should be talking to your agent about the implications of lead paint, even if you don't have children who are under the age of 6. Basically, the lead laws protect a child's right to a lead-safe home. It requires the removal or control of lead paint in houses with children under 6. So you might say, well, I don't have any kids under 6. Well, number one, you might have kids visiting you that are under the age of 6, and lead paint can be lethal. It can cause brain damage to children under 6. So you need to know, and we live in, at least in Massachusetts, we have very old housing stock. So many houses do have lead paint. You need to know what the laws are around lead paint. And this is a conversation you should be having with your agent even before you go out and look at real estate. Are you willing to buy a property that is built before 1978? Because if so, potentially there's lead paint. And even though, I mean, if you have kids, you need to worry about it. But even if you don't have kids, it can potentially impact your ability to sell the property down the road. And the third contract, or the third form that I think is so important, is a buyer agent contract. A buyer broker agreement is basically where you sign an agreement that you agree to work with a particular agent throughout the process of buying a property. Not every real estate agent will ask you to buy one, sign one. In my opinion, the good real estate agents will ask you to sign one. Because I mentioned earlier that great real estate agents are the ones who are going to go find you the property you want to buy, even if it's not on the market right now. No agent is going to do that, in my opinion, unless you've committed to work with just them. So there are consumers out there that say, well, I can work with 7 different real estate agents and I will buy a property through whichever one finds me a property. If you're going to work with agents that way, then basically you're going to have to stick with whatever inventory is on Zillow or local, like the realtor websites. You're not going to find somebody that's going to go out and find the right property for you. You will get a much more committed real estate agent when you sign a buyer broker contract. Typically, by the way, that doesn't even cost you anything extra. So typically the buyer agent is paid by the seller as part of the transaction. So it doesn't cost you more. It's just it's making a commitment to the agent to say, hey, I am only working with you. And for that, I expect that you'll go out and find me a great property, negotiate, market to find real estate, negotiate for me, and help us get a smooth transaction. These are kind of all the things that I think a great real estate agent does. Not every real estate agent goes out and does a CMA before you write or present an offer. But typically, if you've signed a buyer contract with an agent, they will. You want an agent who's going to point out anything that could negatively impact the value of the property. Even though you're super excited, you want the property, you want that agent that's going to say, hey, wait a minute, this might not be a great property for you. They're going to write, offer, and negotiate the agreements, create a marketing campaign to find you the right house, show you properties that you qualify for. They'll provide you lists with service providers. If the house needs work, they'll find you people that can help get the work done. They'll put all of their commitments in writing. They'll let you know the minute they hear of a property that is becoming available in your marketplace, in your price range. And then the commitment that you give to the agent by signing a buyer contract is that you're telling that agent, hey, if any other real estate agent tries to work with me, I'm going to tell them I'm represented by you. I'm only going to work with you during this time period. By the way, they don't last forever. You basically say, hey, for the next 6 months, I'm only committing to work with you. They're going to help you make sure that you work with a great lender. So basically, you're letting the buyer agent know you're going to get pre-approved because you're serious. You're going to be available to preview homes. You're going to provide feedback on homes that you don't love and the ones you do. And you're going to be upfront with your agent about any changes in your circumstances. So that is it. We do love partnering with buyers. And we look at it at Lair Realty. Our clients are like family to us. We make sure that you are protected in the transaction. With that, I want to encourage anybody watching today to call your Lair agent. They can answer any questions for you and help you move forward in the process. Again, this was kind of just a very basic version of the buyer process. And with that, I am going to bring up our first of our panelists. So Bob and Ross Mortgage have been longtime partners of Lair Realty, and they do all kinds of mortgage financing, but today they're specifically going to talk about like FHA loans and 203K mortgages. So with that, I'll let you take it over, Bob.
All right, so I'm going to start with the 203K renovation loan, and then we'll circle back to just the basic FHA plan afterwards. All right, so important things to know about the 203K renovation loan. There's two versions of it, which I'll cover briefly. There's the full 203K, and then there's a Streamline 203K. On the Streamline, you're going to be limited to about $30,000 in work. Nothing can be structural, can't touch any outbuildings. So there's a lot of limitations. And Streamline is really going to be for, new windows, new roof, carpets, kitchen, bathroom, that sort of stuff. And then a full K, people take a ranch, rip off the roof, and add a full additional story to it. So there's really not a lot of limits on it as long as you stay under the county loan limits.
So Bob, before you get into that, basically the 203K would be for somebody that, let's say I find a property and it just needs work before I'd be willing to move into it. Then basically this loan allows you to add in all the costs of doing that work, basically.
Yeah, so there are limitations. You're limited to 100%, 110% of the appraised value after the repairs are made. So when we get an appraisal done on the during the mortgage process, the appraiser gives us a secondary number in addition to the value, the current value. He gives us an as completed value, and again, you can go up to 110% of that.
Okay.
So you may not be able to do everything you want to do on the house. It all depends on what you're qualified for and what the loan limit is for the county you're in.
I just wanted to give, on this particular program, the first house I bought many years ago was using the 203K mortgage. And basically I was able, sometimes people tell you like, don't buy the nicest house on the street because potentially 5 years from now, you might not have a ton of value. Whereas if you buy the dog on the street, the one that needs tons of work, and you're willing to go in and fix it, that potentially you have a property with equity. So I did a 203K many years ago, and I was pleased with how it all worked out. But I'll let you continue, like what you can do, and then what are the limitations? What can't you do with the 203K rehab?
Sure. So these are just a small sampling of what you can do: replacing roof, remodel kitchens and bathrooms. Some of these are going to be a full K. Like if you wanted to add a garage, you can do that. New carpets and flooring. Upgrade, you could add air conditioning, redo the furnace, repair damage either due to pest issues or water. You can make energy efficient improvements, painting interior and exterior, replacing a failed septic, handicapped accessibility, adding square footage. So there's really a lot you can do with it. Like I said, I've had people that have done, bought the house relatively cheaply and then done $300,000 in work to it. So.
Okay, so who determines the value of the work? So let's say I find a property I want to buy and it's a rehab and it needs, in my opinion, it probably needs 50 grand worth of work. Who says it's 50 or 70 or 10 grand?
So what we'll have you do is we'll have you as the buyer meet with your contractor and the HUD consultant, the 203K HUD consultant. Everybody meets, they go over the amount. So they'll attack what needs to be done or what has to be done first from a safety and soundness standpoint. And then the wants will be tallied up after that. Then The contractor will discuss with the consultant, the HUD consultant. They'll come up with a number, and assuming it appraises at or 110% of that amount, then you can do the loan.
And then can I still do, say, a 3% down payment with this?
Yeah, it's 3.5% of the total acquisition. So it's 3.5% of the price and the work.
And are the rates or closing costs significantly higher because I get the opportunity to do this?
Yes, to both. So the closing costs, I wouldn't say significantly higher, but depending on the scope of the job, it could be a couple $1,000s, sometimes 3,000. And then the rate is higher. The rate can be a half to sometimes a point higher.
Okay. And then is there any penalty? So could I go in and, let's say a year from now, my house is done. Can I refinance it?
Absolutely. We see a lot of people doing that. They get into the house for, about a year after they do the work. Then we have it reappraised and get them into usually a conventional loan at that point.
Okay, so functionally, the way the 203K works, when I close on my property, I'm going to put 3.5% down, and that's based on the purchase price plus all the repairs. So if the house is 150 and I'm doing 50 in repairs, then I'm going to be putting down 3.5% of 200,000 roughly.
Yes.
So that's what I come up with. Now, where does that money go? The 50,000 I just put into what happens with that money?
So it's held in escrow and it's released as the work is done. So there'll be a draw schedule that the contractor will have to agree to. Depending on the scope of the job, you can have a maximum of 5 draws during the process. So basically the way it works is in most cases, the builder, actually in almost every case, the builder is going to be the one that has to kind of front the money. There are some workarounds there, but usually when I'm explaining it to people the first time around, it's plan on having your builder be in a position to actually front the money. The work gets done, the money gets released, and that happens 5 times during the process.
Okay. I can't stress enough for anybody watching this program. I think this program, we had so many great stories last year when the market was insane and first-time buyers could not find, like a house would go on the market, there'd be 10 offers and buyers couldn't find real estate. And we saw a lot of buyers use this program to go find those properties that were kind of hidden treasures, those houses that were sitting on the market for a little bit and nobody wanted them because they just needed work, that now those buyers a year later using a 203K have a beautiful property that is like a brand new house in many instances.
Yeah, it's an excellent program, especially since there's people out there, especially first-time buyers, that they're not really accustomed to the way the market works yet. They're thinking they can go out there and offer 10% or 20% under asking price because it needs a little work here or there. Well, that's not really the case. So if you really want a deal and you're a first-time buyer, the deal is going to be the house that's, and I don't want to use the term disaster, but it needs a lot of work. It's sitting on the market. You can use this program and end up with a lot of equity by the time you're done.
Okay, awesome.
So handyman specials, that's another thing we do a lot of with these things, where the house was, it's in decent shape. It was owned by, say, an elderly couple that hadn't updated it since the 50s or 60s. You need to update the kitchens and baths, or the kitchen and baths. Maybe you want to add a bathroom. There's all sorts of stuff you can do with it. If you're doing a big job, you can actually finance up to 6 months of mortgage payments. So you don't have to worry about paying rent or a mortgage in the house you're in while you're doing the work to the other one. That's only on the full 203K. It's only one closing, so you don't have to worry about multiple closings. It's one closing with the money dispersed on a draw basis after closing, as we discussed a little earlier. You can include optional renovations. So again, there's stuff that's required from safety and soundness standpoint, but then cosmetic items, any needs or wants that the buyer has. The only thing you have to be careful of is you can't finance luxury items. So you couldn't use it to put in an in-ground pool or anything like that.
Okay.
You have up to 6 months to complete the renovations. You close before the repairs begin, so you own the house before you start working on it. And again, going back to the maximum loan amount, you can actually go up to 110% of the after improved value, which leaves you a little wiggle room, because sometimes the work you're doing, it may not, may not have a real impact on the value, but it needs to be done. Like, let's say you need a new electrical system. That's not going to add to value, but it has to be done. So that's why they allow you some flexibility there.
Okay.
The Streamline program is much easier it's a much easier process to go through. It says that you can go up to $35,000. Technically speaking, it's really closer to 30, because you have to leave room for the contingency reserve and some other costs. So let's say you're doing $30,000 worth of work. There's going to be another $3,000 that gets put in a contingency reserve in case you run into problems. And then there's some other costs that go along with it too that'll eat up the remainder of the 35. So 30 is really the target.
Gotcha.
It requires a lot less documentation. There's no HUD consultant. It's basically, you find a contractor, you get a price that they agree to do the job for. We can usually disperse half the money at the closing. It's a two-party check, so the buyer gets it and the contractor gets it. And then once the work is complete, the balance of the money is dispersed.
Gotcha.
All contractors must be licensed. You can't do the work yourself, even if you're a licensed contractor. The underwriter has to review everything on the contractor to make sure that insurance and licenses and everything else is in order. We basically want to make sure the buyer's protected so that we don't have to worry about them being out 30 grand when it's all said and done. Let's see. And then there's some other general information that the underwriter is going to look for, but that's a little more specific that we need to cover right now.
Okay.
Oops.
And then you're going to talk to us about FHA loans as well?
Yeah. So FHA loans in general, they're really geared towards first-time home buyers. I actually bought my first house with an FHA loan. Back when I bought, you had to have more than 3.5, or you couldn't do a less than 5% down conventional loan. So a lot more people would do an FHA back then. Really what FHA is going to help with is people that have limited credit, lower credit scores, and higher debt to income ratios. Now things have tightened up a little bit in the last 3-4 weeks since the pandemic hit. But we're expecting things to normalize at some point in the next month or two. And it should go back to where it was. So just for an example, if you have even right now, you can still purchase a home with 3.5% down with a credit score as low as 620. That was 600 up until a few weeks ago, and you could even get them through at 580 if you have 10% down. So there's a lot of people that will fit into FHA that just wouldn't have a shot in any other program.
Okay. So, and that's 3.5% down?
3.5% down, yeah. And the real big win on FHAs is you can actually buy 3 or 4 unit properties. They all have to be owner occupied, but you could buy a 3 to 4 unit property to live in with 3.5% down. So it's a great program.
Okay, awesome. And how do people find you, Bob?
They can find us on the web at rossmortgageco.com.
Awesome.
And you get all the contact info there and contact info for all the loan offices and what offices they work in.
Awesome. rossmortgageco.com. Thank you, Bob, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Next, we have Nancy from Citizens Bank. Thanks for joining us, Nancy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stacy, for having us today. And congratulations to everybody who's out looking for their first home, and a great journey to be on, especially now when you have a lot of time on your hands to look on things online, and it seems to be the way the business is going. So we're pretty excited about that. I'm going to give you a little overview of Citizens, and I'm going to turn it over to Marty Gilman to talk about MHP, which is one of our first-time homebuyer programs that we love, and we're the #1 MHP lender in the state. And we're a lot of prospective buyers using that program. And then Rob is going to talk about Destination Home Mortgage, which is a portfolio program for first-time home buyers that offers an opportunity for a grant in addition to, a low down payment with a low interest rate and no mortgage insurance. So just a little bit about, So you did a great job, Stacy, talking about the mortgage process in your presentation. And pretty awesome. So I'll just give you guys a little bit of an update on what's going on with the coronavirus and Citizens Bank. We're still, for the most part, business as usual. Some programs have shifted a little bit on FICOs, which is your credit score, and down payments. But for the most part, the first-time buyer is still in the game with us. A lot of our programs are portfolio, and so we're making the conditions for the loans. Some of them do get sold to Fannie and Freddie as well. But as far as being online right now, our mortgage originators have always been online. And so taking this to, the home office hasn't been a difficult thing for us to do. It was getting our operations centers, in tune with that, and then connecting with the closing attorneys. And Army and Roach, Larry and Jim have been great to work with. So we've had an awesome experience with them. So basically what happens now with an appraisal, if it's possible to get into the property, we're going to go in and take a look at it and, take some pictures and come up with a value through the comparable sale process. But if it's not possible to get into the property for whatever reason, like in some states, Vermont, for example, they're not allowing appraisals. The governor isn't allowing appraisals to go into properties. In Massachusetts, we're still allowed to do that. But sometimes the borrower can say, or the owner can say, I don't want you in my property, so we have to comply to that. So what we'll do is we'll do either a desktop underwrite, which is we take the information from the market and we create a value, or we'll do a drive-by and do a comparative analysis that way. So there's opportunity for sure for us to move forward with an appraisal. Income verification is through a pay stub. Typically prior to closing, we'll do a 24 hours, just a verification of employment with, employment being an issue right now with so many workers getting unemployment. We have to verify 24 hours prior to you closing on your loan. We'll do that through a pay stub. We'll do it through your bank account showing an automatic deposit through your payroll. And we'll do it from an email from an HR department. So that's great. And then closings are now online too. So we're able to get some gap insurance. If the registry isn't open, the attorneys are able to get the gap insurance to cover us in a line in a queue so that we're able to be protected on that lien. So that's great news. Citizens is a local lender. We have 240 bank branches in Massachusetts. So we're able to outreach into the community. We do a lot of community events and really here to support the first-time home buyer and Layer Real Estate together. I'm happy to be partnered with them. Some of the great programs that we have is the MHP, the DHM, which are the two programs we're going to discuss today. We also have a construction to perm program like the 203K, although I think the 203K is really great for a specific buyer. And Ross Mortgage does a great job with that. We have a true construction loan. So if you wanted to purchase land and build a house, we can do that with you too. And those are all portfolio programs. We have a doctor loan, which allows a low down payment and no mortgage insurance, which is fantastic. We can do that with 5% down. And we have a true portfolio. So we're not correspondent lenders. We're not, looking for a home for that loan after we fund it. We keep the loan in the portfolio. We sell it to Fannie and Freddie, and then we service it. So you're always making your payment to Citizens, and you always have that connection of having the branch in the community. So it's a nice feeling. But I'm going to turn it over to Marty to talk a little bit about the One Mortgage, which is a great program that we have here.
Hey, Stacy, how are you today?
Doing great. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, no, my pleasure. Thanks for having us. I appreciate it. So, guys, I'm here to talk to you guys today about the One Mortgage program. It's administered by Massachusetts Housing Partnership, not to be confused with Mass Housing. Similar names, but two completely different programs. Mass Housing Partnership is a statewide public nonprofit bond program in Massachusetts. Why should you choose a One Mortgage? Well, number one, it's a very low interest rate. In fact, it's below market interest rates. Today, if someone were to apply today and they qualify for the One Mortgage, they would get a rate of 3% on a 30-year fixed. The second reason why, low down payment. For a single family, condominium, or a two-family property, 3% is required. Of the 3%, half should be your own funds. The other half can be a gift or a grant. And then for a three-family property, 5% is required for a down payment. Third reason why, no private mortgage insurance. So you're getting this below market interest rate. In addition to that, you have no PMI. So that increases the buyer's buying power and in fact makes it the cheapest option for them as a first-time home buyer. And then furthermore, another reason why for borrowers that fall into the low income class, MHP, in instances, will provide a subsidy for their mortgage. And that is a zero interest loan that they do not have to pay back unless they refinance or sell the property in the future. So if their debt ratio is a little on the high side and they fall into that low income class, MHP will provide a subsidy for them. And again, that also increases their buying power. And of course, one of the great things about MHP is that it uses a conventional appraisal. As realtors, I'm sure you've had, a few deals blow up at the closing table or at the appraisal level when a property inspection comes back with peeling paint. That is not an issue with MHP. It uses the same appraisal process as a conventional loan. So your deals will not blow up in an instance such as that. First-time homebuyer rules. Everybody in the household has to be a first-time homebuyer. And a first-time homebuyer is designated as someone who has not owned a home in the last 3 years. Now, there are some exceptions to that. For instance, a displaced homemaker or a recent divorce. As long as you have custody of the children, if you owned a home with your spouse prior to that, but you've been divorced, now you have custody of your kids, even if it's joint custody, you'll still be considered a first-time home buyer, okay? Another reason, if you're one of those people that happen to own a trailer or a houseboat prior to this, you can still be a first-time home buyer having owned either one of those two properties. So there are exceptions. How do you qualify for MHP1? Well, the first thing is there are very strict income limits that MHP has established, but the income limits do change based on where the property is located, as well as the number of people in the household. Okay, so if you have a single person household in Boston, the income limits could be dramatically different from a 4-person household in Chelmsford. So it's super important that you talk to your loan officer and say, hey, look, I'm looking to buy a house in Chelmsford or in Westford or in Dracut. There's 4 people in my family. What are the max income limits that we can use to qualify for that property? All of that information is available on MHP's website. You can simply Google MHP1 income limits. It's a PDF. It pops up online. You can pull it up and look for it yourself. But again, you're more than welcome to contact myself or another loan officer here at Citizens Bank. The second criteria is you have to have $75,000 or less in assets. Assets are things such as your checking, your savings, if you own stocks or bonds, gifts, a gift of equity. So for instance, if you're buying a house and your mom and dad say, hey, look, we want to give you $50,000 towards your down payment. If you have more than $25,000 in checking or savings, well, you're not going to qualify for this program. Things we don't count would be most retirement accounts, your college savings plans. We don't count those as well. However, your Roth IRA is considered a liquid asset, and that would be counted towards that $75,000 in assets. So again, all that stuff has to be disclosed, and make sure that we're going over this with a fine-tooth comb and make sure you qualify. The last thing you want to do is get you guys to the closing table and find out there's an error. So make sure you disclose all that information, please, up front. And then the fourth criteria is borrowers must meet their credit score requirements. So you need to have a 640 credit score for either a condominium or a single family residence. 660 for a 2-unit or a 3-unit. Now, the beauty of the MHP1 program is if you're a 640 credit score or an 810 credit score, you get the same rate. There's no risk-based pricing. So if you're doing, for instance, if you're doing a home ready product and you're a 720 credit score versus a 660 credit score, the rates are going to be dramatically different, as well as the PMI. So for this program here, the rate's exactly the same, and there is no MI. So it increases your buying power and keeps that home super affordable for you. In addition, we do allow for non-traditional credit. So if you don't have the minimum trade driving requirements, we can use alternative credit, things such as your rent payments, your gym memberships, your utility bills. All of that stuff can be used to establish non-traditional credit and still qualify for the MHP1 program. Now, I was mentioning earlier about this is the cheapest option for a first-time home buyer in Massachusetts. Well, how cheap is it? If and let's say we took a purchase of a $300,000 home, okay? Borrower has a 680 credit score. Today, with us, if you went MHP, again, the rate is 3%. If you went FHA with us, the rate would be 3.5%. And if you did the Home Ready program, the rate would be 3.875%. So again, because the score is below 740, there's some risk-based pricing, so the rate's a little bit higher. Of course, with both FHA and MHP, the rate is the rate. It doesn't change based on your credit score as long as you meet the minimum credit requirements. The MI for the Home Ready program would also be higher because, again, the credit score is affecting your MI rate. And again, there's no MI with MHP. So if you were to compare all three loans together, MHP is about 22.5% cheaper overall than FHA. And in this situation, it'd be 26% cheaper than the Home Ready program. So you're talking a significant change in monthly payment, which also can relate to a significant change in how much house they can afford. As far as requirements go, they need to take a first-time home buyer education seminar. It can be done either online or in person. Obviously, right now, everything is done online. Those classes are available at MHP's website, or I can provide those for you as well. And then once you close on the house, you have to take a post-purchase closing class as well. And you have 1 year to take that. Those are the only two requirements besides the fact it must remain your primary residence. MHP states that if you were to vacate the property as your primary residence, you're supposed to refinance it. So just keep that in mind, please. This is a primary residence only loan. We're not going to re-verify your income after closing. So for instance, again, you meet the income limits right now, but you're expecting a raise in 3 to 6 months. Doesn't matter. It's whatever your income is at closing is what you're going to qualify for. We're not going to come back and say, hey, look, you got a pay raise post-closing. You have to refinance out of this program. That's not the case. We're not going to re-verify your assets. And the beauty of this program is as well, it's cheap to get into, and you also have access to the equity in your property post-closing. So we're not going to cap on how much you can sell your house for 10 years down the road. So whatever the market dictates is what you can sell your house for. It's all yours. Any questions at all for me, Stacy?
No, that sounds awesome.
Very good. I'm going to turn it over to Robert Franklin now. He's going to discuss the DHM product.
Awesome.
See me? Good. Hi, Stacy. Thank you for having us. It's a
Yes,
great
thank you.
opportunity to get in front of you guys. So yeah, I wanted to cover the DHM product. It is a great product that complements the MHP loan and picks up kind of where MHP leaves off in a few aspects. With MHP, you've got household income requirements to consider, and they will use income under the table. Income we couldn't traditionally use for underwriting purposes to qualify you for the loan. They will use it to disqualify you based on the income limits. So we run into that, quite often when you're dealing with family households and someone's working part-time, but they haven't been on the job for 2 years. I can't use any of that income. Any income that fluctuates, if you don't have a 2-year history of it, you can't use it. So with DHM now, it gives us an outlet that we can look at the income limits, leave one of the parties off of the loan, one of the spouses if they're in that situation, and just use the primary person who's got a stable job, stable income, and if they fit the income requirements for DHM, we can go that route. For instance, I want to throw some numbers out there so you don't think it's, it's only for people making $40,000 or $30,000 a year. It can fit a lot of people. Just for example, Middlesex County, 4-person household in MHP, $119,000. It's going to fit a lot of folks. With the DHM product, they don't have household income. With MHP, it's 1 person up to 8 people in the household, and has a different income limit for each criteria there. With DHM, they're just using really the 4-person household income limit, if you're looking at the limits on MHP, and they'll go by 80% of that. So if one person makes 80% of that 100% median income, they can fit DHM, we just leave the other person off the loan. Still 3% down, still no PMI. The interest rate, depending on if you're low or moderate income, will differ a little bit, like 0.25%. And that rate is a little bit higher than MHP, but it's still right around where the conventional rate is at. Conventional rate maybe 3.375 or 3.5. You might be 3.75 if you're moderate income versus low income. Low income, you get that extra quarter off. Low income is considered 50% of median income for that area. Okay, so very important to talk to your loan officer and at least have a property address or a county where you're buying it, because most of the counties, they're all same. They're all the same for each town, the limits. Now with same thing, you can use this on a 1, 2, 3 family house. You can also use DHM on a 4 family house. MHP you cannot. Okay, 1 to 2 person house or 1 to 2 unit house, 3% down minimum down payment, still no PMI. If you go into a 3 or 4 unit, you got to put 5% down. Okay, that's the difference there. Another difference with DHM, you can use this in a refinance, rate and term refinance. It's not just a first-time homebuyer program. I can refinance someone into this. So if they had PMI and they're low to moderate income, I can put them in this product. Another nice piece of this, if the property that you're buying, say you don't meet the income limits, and now you're looking at possibly going home ready or conventional or FHA, you can look at the property address that you're buying, right? So maybe if I'm doing a pre-qualification for somebody, I can't determine whether they can actually go this route because their income is too much. But then when we have a property address, if we look it up in the FFIC website to find out low or moderate income, we also can find out whether the property is located in a low to moderate income census tract. So when I plug in the address, it'll come back low or mod for either one. If that property is in there, income limits go out the window. We don't have to fit income at all. And that's come in very handy for a lot of situations with folks. What else? Covered that. Closing cost assistance can be used. So here at Citizens, we have closing cost assistance. Up to $2,500 we will give someone. So if they qualify for this program with the income, not the census tract piece, but the income piece, low or moderate income, we will give them $2,500 towards down payment or closing costs. So great way to couple that maybe with seller concessions to pick up closing costs and prepaids, and we can put that whole $2,500 towards the down payment.
Awesome.
Yeah, huge. And I don't think we've run out of money for years in that. MHP, we've never run out of money. I've been here for 10 years. We've never run out of money for MHP. And the closing cost assistance, they granted, what was it, $1.5 million towards it. And we haven't even scratched the surface of that money right now. So really, really great to go in tandem with the DHM product. And
I'll just make one other point with the DHM closing cost grant. You can use it for closing costs or the down payment. So depending on how you structure the transaction, you can give up to 3% of a credit from the seller towards closing costs. And then if the FICO score is above 700, you can use that $2,500 from us as credit towards the down payment. So there's some really efficient ways to make your money go a little bit further through some of the programs that we have, which would allow you to have less money down technically to qualify for a property. So it's a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Back to Rob.
Definitely. So, and then I just want to touch upon the down payment requirements. Of that 3%, if your FICO score is over 700 for this product, you only have to have 1% or $1,000 of your own saved funds. The rest can come from a gift. If you're under 700, the 3% has to be all of your own saved funds. Okay, 3 to 4 unit property, the 5%, again, under 700 FICO score, all of that 5% has to be your own saved funds. If you're over 700, 3% of your own saved funds on just the 3 to 4 unit properties.
By the way, your own saved funds can be your tax refund, correct?
Correct, correct. Any legitimate source that's been deposited, a refund check from an insurance company, something that they can track back to, oh, someone gave this to you because you earned it or you were entitled to it, it can be deposited right away. And I'm glad you brought that up, because assets are the biggest tripping point with first-time home buyers, and they're gonna ask for 2 months bank statements. So any large deposit that shows up on those 2 months bank statements, they're gonna question, and you're gonna have to explain and then source where that money came from. But if they see a direct deposit from your bank or from your employer, they know that is legitimate. Money from, like you said, an insurance check, or even the refunded money that comes back to you if a property falls through. A customer puts an offer in and they don't like the home inspection, they back out, get under contract again, sometimes can cause
Right.
some questions around those deposits. As long as you're showing the money trail, it all came from a legitimate source. That's all you run saved funds.
Yes. All right. And how do people get in touch with the Citizens Bank crew?
So first, individually, should we put, okay, so you'd want to search Citizens Bank, Martin Gilman, or Citizens Bank, Robert Franklin. We're the first ones that come up, and you can apply right online. You can find our contact information, call us, talk to us. Within 10, 15-minute conversation, I can find out if somebody is qualified for these products, and then show them how to apply and how to get in touch with the first-time homebuyer classes, which we didn't touch upon either. You've got to take a first-time homebuyer class for both of these products, but it's really simple, and it's actually really great information that everyone should have.
Awesome. Thank you guys for your time tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you
Thanks,
for having
Stacy.
it. Appreciate it,
Stacy.
Stacy.
Good luck, guys.
All right. And next up, we have with us Sean Rizzo and Mike Healy from Tiger Home Inspection. You guys still there?
Yes, we are.
All right. Let me pull. You guys don't have a presentation, correct?
Nope, just good information.
Let's see. All right, I got you guys both unmuted, and let me pull off my thing, and then we can hear what you guys have to say about the process. I mean, I always tell people last year, I don't know if you guys saw it, but when there was like massive bidding wars, a lack of inventory, so many buyers were like waiving home inspection, and that like just makes me want to cringe. Like, I feel like the home inspection is the most important piece to buying a house, but what are your thoughts on it?
Well, my name's Sean Rizzo. I'm the owner of Tiger Home Inspection, and thank you for having us. I will certainly get to your question there. The home inspection process during this very difficult time, what we're going through, has changed. I just want to touch on that a little bit.
Yes.
During this time, we are requesting when the buyer books their inspection or schedules their inspection, that they realize that we're trying to minimize the number of people that are at the home inspection. We're requesting no more than 2 people at the home inspections. Usually we are used to of what we refer to as herding cats, meaning we have the buyer's in-laws, the uncle that's a contractor, 2 real estate agents, and a handful of kids going along. So we're trying to eliminate all that and just bring it down to the inspector, maybe a real estate agent sits outside, and a buyer, and maybe a significant other, because of everything that's going on in the world. So things have changed on that end. But we are certainly, as a company, following the CDC guidelines, trying to keep safe distancing, wear a mask, and all those things. We're not here to preach the CDC guidelines. We know what they are, and that's not what this is about. So again, Sean Rizzo, we inspect all over Eastern Mass, Southern New Hampshire, in the state of Rhode Island. We are the largest independent home inspection company in New England. That doesn't in itself make us the best, but it is our core business. We do not dabble anything else but home inspection, so we're very proud of that. Yes, to answer your question, does it make me cringe? Yes, it makes me cringe on many levels. The fact that you're about to commit to biggest financial investment of your life, maybe besides your education, but I think this would still beat it, and not have someone come in behind you or look out for your best interest, to me, doesn't make any sense. To spend, plus or minus $500 to $700 for a home inspection, and for us to look at it in an unbiased view. We're there to perform the home inspection, and we're there to tell you about the mechanical items. We're not there to tell you about the school system. That's the real estate agent's job. We're not there to tell you about the neighborhood. Not my job. I'm just there to inspect the home, what I see, the major components, roof, all the mechanical items, and that's our job. I'm slowly going to pass over to Mike Healy, who's our, we started in 1990. He's been with us since 1990. He is our inspector supervisor. All the inspectors roll up into Mike Healy. He also, not that it matters, but he also sits on the Board of Home Inspections at the state level. So he's very well versed, not only in the home inspection process, but the home inspection law as well. I would just like to tell everybody that when you're looking at the house, and you touched on it earlier, Stacy, I think it's very important that when you're going around looking at homes, don't look at solely the home that you're going to go visit. Look across the street. See if they have a new roof. Look across the other side of the street. See if they replace windows. See where the house sits. Does it sit on the bottom of the hill where there may be water runoff? Are there pine trees? Is there what areas are there that could cause certain wood boring infestation or trapped termites and carpenter ants? Is there a river? I like your example earlier, Stacy. Is there a train? So don't just solely focus on the home, your specific home. Look around you, because there's a lot to be learned. Don't be afraid to ask the nosy neighbor walking the dog and say, hey, what do you know about the Rizzo's house? And they'll say the Rizzos lived there for 45 years. They had 2 kids. They all went off to college, great family. But geez, every time there was rain, the guy had a sump pump and water pumping out of his back of the yard. You'd be amazed what people can tell you about neighborhoods. But that's my little side story. I'm going to pass over to Mike, and maybe you can touch on the process of the home inspection, because I know we're a little prejudiced, Mike, but we think the home inspection of it is a fun time. And as we say, you never know what's behind the door until you open it. Go ahead, Mike.
Stacy, thanks for having us. This is great.
Yeah, thank you.
I do want to touch on, before I move forward, on what you brought up, the situation not long ago when people were really kind of fighting and clawing over, over deals. We'd get the phone call that was even kind of, to us, it's almost sadder than not getting the inspection, if that's possible, is we'd get the call 3 months after they closed, and they were wondering if we could do the inspection because they're starting to discover things about the house they purchased without an inspection, because it's the house they really wanted and we're up against, so many other bids. So we regularly run into at that time, we were running into situations where people kind of wanted us to be called in. We're not in love with being expert witnesses or any of that kind of stuff, but it does go on. That was the fallout from that kind of that time in the market. It was really rough.
Absolutely. And by the way, even if somebody's buying new construction, I tell them still do a home inspection. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, again, avoiding the fact that we're in the home inspection business, we do home inspections on new construction all the time. And a lot of times you'll find that the contractor, builder, whoever says it was inspected by the town and, that's good enough. You do have to remember, and this is not a knock on local building inspectors, but town building inspectors don't have, quote, skin in the game. They do their job. Sometimes they have a lot of work to do in a short amount of time. Sometimes they have contractors they trust, and sometimes all things don't get looked at. We've done numerous inspections on new construction and found things that you'd be surprised at. Not every subcontractor is as good as the general contractor. Sometimes the sub to the sub cannot do the job and it can go unnoticed. So the answer is new construction, rehabs, flips, just regular sales. It never hurts to get a little more education.
So many of the people watching tonight are true first-time home buyers. This is the first time they've even started the process of buying a home. Can you explain, what is the typical home inspection process like?
Yes. So what we do, what we look for is, the big thing is we want you there and we want you to ask questions. The goal of the home inspection is to educate. It is, to educate you on what you're going to be purchasing. There was some talk earlier in this presentation that it can be, people do use it to renegotiate. There's a lot of different things that go on with the information. But what we want is, at the end of the inspection, we want you to have a good idea of what you're going to be involved in for the next 30 years, possibly. The way that we'd approach it is, we like to get there. I'd get there a little bit early, 15, 20 minutes early, just walk around, introduce myself to the seller if they're home, walk around, get a feel for the house, that when you get there, I can kind of get us going. We'll work around the exterior of the house. We work down low first, looking for carpenter ants, termites, foundation, grading. We step back, second time around, roof, gutters, chimney. If there's a third time needed, we do it, depending on the style, location of the house. Garage, if it's not attached. And then I'll stop, set up, and download some information from the exterior. We then move on to the basement, and that's really where the meat of the inspection really takes place. The water lines in, waste lines out. We take a look at the heat, whether it's a boiler or furnace, the hot water tank, the electrical panel, so water in, water out, heat, hot water, electric. We look at the structure where it's accessible. Again, I'll stop, load some information in, and then we'll work our way through the house. The living space is pretty straightforward. It's going to be windows, outlets, under-counter plumbing. We're looking to make sure that things work and function as they're intended. And this is something that's important. It's kind of a little aside here. When I go into a house, and if I go look at a 1958 Cape, and the original owners, are just leaving it now, it may be they could have taken meticulous care of it, and it's in perfect condition, and it works just the way it was built. That can be, I look at that could be a good home inspection in the sense that everything's functioning as intended. But the standards do change. The first contractor you have in is going to list all the things that don't meet today's code. Home inspection, take this, one thing if you take away today is home inspections in Massachusetts are not to code, and they're not allowed to comment on code. So what we look for is performance, safety, condition, all right? So as we work our way through the living space, up through windows, outlets, under-counter plumbing, we're looking for discoloration, water staining, always look in the closets. No one ever paints the closets. They're the last place to get paint. Under the stairs, especially in the basement, there's a lot of little places. We finish up in the attic, and there's a lot that goes on there. We're looking for signs of leaking, organic growth, which is the code word for mold. There can be mold conditions. Insulation, ventilation, structure. So just work our way through, and all along through this process, we hope that you participate. And as Sean commented, in today's conditions, we do want to limit the number of people. We do, we'd like to have the 2 people with us. But really, we really hope that you can be there and that you ask all the questions you can.
And then can you comment on what is it, because you give them a report, what does the report have on it?
So what we generate for you is there's a couple different styles of reports. It's called a modified checklist. We're going to give you when we work our way through the report, we put it together. It's a computer-generated report. There's going to be pictures. We're going to email it to you. And what you'll find is that each item, in Massachusetts, the state has a set of regulations. So there's a baseline that all reports should meet, and then you can exceed it, and that's what we do. So what happens is you're going to have an evaluation A, the item is functioning as intended. B, that's some repair, maintenance, that type of thing. C, the item has either reached full life expectancy or maybe need to be replaced. And then there's a contractor symbol, because we don't expect homeowners to replace their own boiler or do their own electric work unless they're qualified. So with the report, you'll get the ratings, and then to the right, there'll be comments to support the observations and the evaluations. So our goal is to give you, with the checklist, a reasonable and fairly handy way to get a grip on the report, and then the supporting, the narrative to the right will help support it. There's other methods out there, but it's not excessively long. It's not like a baby book or anything like that. It's usually pretty manageable.
All right, awesome. And how can people get in touch with you guys at Tiger?
That's you, Sean.
Yeah, well, you can certainly call us on the phone. We do answer our phone 7 days a week that we're very proud of, from 8 in the morning till 10 at night. Some of that works directly for the company. We always just go with the 1-800-62-TIGER, and that should suffice. I'd also like to add for your people down in Rhode Island that as of April 1st of this year, Rhode Island just became a state in which you need to be licensed and perform home inspections. So just people doing your business for the real estate agents as well as the buyers, make sure that as of April 1st that the home inspector does carry a Rhode Island license. They're performing inspections in that area. Very important.
Awesome. And your contact info again?
Sean, SEAN, Tiger, 67 @hotmail.com.
SeanTiger67@hotmail.com.
Yeah, Stacy, I'd also like to say, and I know you'll smile at this, at the end of the inspection, the buyer will turn to us and say, should I buy this house?
Mm-hmm.
We do not answer that question.
That's
Right.
awesome.
That we do not answer. We say, here's your information. You can now sit down with your real estate agent, your attorney, and you can make an educated decision. That is not my business. Just like it's not my business to comment on the price of the home. There's
That's what I
nothing.
say. It's not like a pass fail. It's really
No.
like just an education about this huge investment that you're making.
Yep.
You wouldn't believe how many times at the inspection people will say, Stacey, so did we pass?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's not our thing. And I think the buyer really finds it interesting how we look at the house that they fall in love with completely in a different view. And I
Yeah.
think it's really a fun part of the inspection. I think a lot of the real estate agents actually like that part of it too, because very few times you don't learn something about the home that you didn't realize the first few times through.
Yeah. And I'll say as a brokerage, we love it because typically it's the buyers that are unhappy down the road after buying a home are almost always the ones that did not get an inspection because they really just didn't know exactly what they were buying, but you're eventually going to find out one way or another. So might as well do it now with a home inspector.
Well, the other one, Stacy, of course, with a smile, I know I'm being a little long-winded, is we're not going to have the home inspection. Uncle Jim, who was a contractor 40 years ago, was going to do it.
Yeah.
And we know how that goes. That can make for a quiet holiday.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing some insight on home inspections for us tonight.
Thank you so much for having us, Stacy. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Bye.
And next up, we have Jim Kahn, one of our favorite closing attorneys from Army and Roach. Thanks for joining us, Jim.
Thanks for having me, Stacey. I appreciate it as always.
So first of all, do you have a presentation or are you talking to us?
I do have a presentation, very short and sweet, and we'll try and make up some time here. Let's see, we're running a little behind on the
That's all right.
category here, but we'll get there. And I'm always happy to answer questions offline afterward as well. So anyone that needs to reach me, you'll have contact information. I'm happy to share my time and hopefully some expertise with people.
Thank you.
Let me just swap this out. Can you see the presentation right now?
We can. Looks good.
Perfect. Well, thank you. So there you go. Just the title page kind of speaks for itself. I'm from Army and Roach. I head up the real estate division. We're a full service law firm. We do a lot of other things besides real estate, but my role there is to manage the team of attorneys that handle the real estate transactions. So we represent buyers, sellers, lenders, purchases, refis, first-time home buyers, etc. So if it's related to real estate, we pretty much have it covered. So the topic of this short and sweet and hopefully to the point topic today is why you ought to have an attorney to protect you. Next slide just shows kind of what the document where the attorney gets involved is at the purchase and sales agreement level. So as you know, Stacy, the real estate agents will negotiate the terms of an offer to purchase on behalf of a buyer, and that will contain the material terms of the transaction. But the attorneys then, in Massachusetts anyway, go to what's called the purchase and sales agreement. That is the longer-winded version of the offer to purchase. So it goes on to contain all of the same terms that are contained in the offer and a whole lot more. Some of those terms are there for the buyer's protection and some are there for the seller's protection. So it's important for the parties to have an attorney that can explain the documents, explain the process, explain the legal mumbo jumbo and answer the questions in simple layman's terms. I recognize that our audience today is first-time home buyers, so they've literally never done this before. At the most in their lifetimes, they're going to do it a handful of times. This is something that we do day in, day out, week in, week out. I've done thousands of transactions, thousands of these contracts, and I recognize and I never lose sight of the fact that this is the biggest investment that a buyer is going to make. I take that very seriously. This is their money, and their transaction. And my job is to educate them along the way to make it a smooth transaction. And if we hit bumps in the road, because it does happen, I'm there to have their back, educate them again, answer their questions, and allow them to make the decision that's right for them. So we can discuss the pros and cons and the ramifications of all the decision-making processes along the way. So the purchase and sales agreement, as you see from this slide, covers the important terms of the transaction. So the dates, closing date, the financing contingency date, et cetera, all of the important terms of what's included, what's not included. Does the washer and dryer come with the property? Is the property going to be re-roofed before you acquire it? Are they going to have the boiler serviced, et cetera? It talks about the deposits, how much they are, who's going to be holding them. It contains the contingencies that will have been negotiated. So the biggest one that's been alluded to a couple of times on your program today is the mortgage contingency or the financing contingency. This is the document or the provision that allows a buyer to back out of a transaction in the event that they do not have an unconditional financing commitment letter by the financing contingency date. So that's a date that is hugely important. It's the most important provision for a buyer in the terms of, in the purchase sales agreement. So we as the law firm always watch that date so as to protect their deposits from their inability to get financing. There's also typically riders to a purchase sales agreement, and nowadays with COVID-19, there are even more riders than ever in the past. Riders dealing with what happens if one party or the other contracts the virus or has to care for someone with the virus. What happens if the lender can't fund the loan due to COVID-19 restrictions? What happens if the seller can't get the smoke detector inspection done in time for the closing because a lot of fire departments are no longer doing those inspections? So those things are all handled by riders that are part of the purchase and sales agreement. So why go it alone is kind of what I say. We're there to protect your interests from the very beginning of the transaction through the closing and beyond. We oftentimes hear from our clients after the fact when they get a tax bill in the mail and wonder if they're supposed to pay it or not. We're happy to take those calls or emails so that everyone is on the same page throughout the closing and beyond. So that's kind of the purchase and sales agreement. And you and I just did a seminar last week where we spent an hour talking about every single term of the purchase and sales agreement. That's not the purpose of today's discussion. So I just give you kind of a brief overview of the document, what it's intended to cover and what it's supposed to include. Again, I'm happy to go into it in as much or as little detail as any particular buyer might have particular questions about afterward.
So a couple of things I want to point out is, first of all, this is one of the areas where things are slightly different between Massachusetts and New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, you can actually close a transaction. You can buy a house without an attorney handling the closing. However, in Massachusetts, things are very different. So first of all, in Massachusetts, if you're getting a mortgage, it's going to be an attorney that has to close the mortgage. That's number one. Number two, in Massachusetts, unlike New Hampshire has a very simple purchase agreement, which is also the offer on the property. In Massachusetts, typically you're ending up with a 20+ page contract that you're going to sign with the seller. And in Massachusetts, I would guess somewhere around 80% of sellers are represented by an attorney. So that's why I encourage buyers to also get represented. But one thing I want to point out that you guys do is that, let's just say that you want to be represented. You can go to Army and Roche and say, Jim, I want you to represent me. We'll talk about what the fee looks like in a second. I want you to review the purchase and sale agreement, negotiate the nitty-gritty details from what the seller's purchase and sale agreement might look like, and also have you do the closing. Because potentially if somebody does that, where you're going to review everything for them, and you're going to do the closing, no matter what, they have to pay for a closing attorney. That's a given, correct?
That is correct. Every lender in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts will require that an attorney close the loan on behalf of that lender. That cost of that attorney will be passed to the buyer as part of their closing costs. It's one of the disclosures up front. The buyer does not have to get their own attorney. It's optional. The lender doesn't care because the lender has their attorney to protect them. That's how strongly they feel about it. But they don't require the buyer to get their own attorney if they choose not to. We at Army and Roach have a special arrangement with the realtors at Lair, where if we're representing the lender as well as part of the transaction, doing the title work for the lender, we charge no fee whatsoever to the buyer for buyer representation. So it's hard to beat a $0 fee versus going it alone. And then again, you get all of our expertise throughout the process and beyond. And the reason that we can do both, this is a common question that we always get, is, can I trust the attorney that's representing the lender to represent my interests as well? And the answer is yes. There's no conflict of interest there because those interests align. The lender doesn't want to loan on a piece of property that has a title issue any more than a buyer wants to buy that piece of property with the title issue. So the seller is on the opposite side of that ledger. You can't represent a seller and a buyer or a seller and a lender, but the buyer's interests align sufficiently with the lender's interests that it's definitely more the rule than it is the exception, where the same attorney is representing both the buyer and the lender. So since you're going to be paying the lender's attorney to close the loan anyway, you may as well reach out to that attorney and see if they can either give you a discount or waive the fee altogether, like our firm does, to represent your interests as well.
I can't stress enough that, with every home sale, there's a myriad, I said earlier, of little things that potentially can go wrong that you have no control over. The real estate agent has no control, the buyer has no control, and it's really nice when a buyer has that extra level of protection, that attorney that can step in and get involved. So what I want you to think about is, imagine that your moving van is all packed, you're ready to close in 2 days, and the seller, for whatever reason, says they're not going to be out of the house. It makes a big difference having an attorney on your side that can say, I'll pick up the phone and help resolve the issue. Anything else you want to add, Jim?
Not about the purchase sales agreement. So there's a couple more quick things that I just wanted to cover, and I will be brief, I promise. The other component that real estate attorney does is it completes a title search. So in Massachusetts, you're required to have a 50-year title search, a minimum of 50 years, so back to a good deed. And that reviews the public records affecting that particular piece of real estate to make sure that the person you're buying it from really owns it, that it's not subject to liens, mortgages, foreclosures, other debts, anything that would adversely impact the property. So that's part of the role of the closing attorney as well, is to conduct that title search and make sure that you're getting what you think you're getting. Dovetailing on that, there's an owner's title insurance policy. Again, a lender will require you to purchase at your expense a title insurance policy that covers the lender's interest in the property. That's to protect the lender, and every lender in the state will require it. There's no exceptions to that. But your owner's policy is optional, and it's there to protect you. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with a title search. It could be mere negligence where the title examiner just misses something. You're protected with that owner's title insurance policy. Or it could be something where there's no negligence committed and they couldn't have discovered it. For example, a mortgage or a deed from the mid-'80s that was signed and notarized and recorded at the Registry of Deeds and appears to be valid on its face. Turns out that the husband signed the wife's name and it was notarized and recorded. You can't tell as a title examiner that signature was a forgery that is protected by the title insurance policy. Because technically, if that's the case, they could go back and unring that bell, so to speak, and unwind that so that this wife's interest wasn't properly conveyed in the mid 80s. So the person you're buying it from doesn't actually own the property. They only own 50% of the property. If you buy it from them, you only got what they have. So in that particular case, it could be a forgery, it could be missing heirs, where someone comes forward and says, my great grandfather owned this property, and I'm his long lost great grandson from Florida. I own a 1/16 interest. If they prove that they do, you only own 15/16. So the title insurance policy will step up and cover that loss, defend the claim, assign an attorney, and ultimately, if it has to pay for it, it will pay for it so that you get what you're supposed to be getting, which is free and clear title to the property. The last piece that I just want to touch on, it's good to know for any first-time home buyer, is a declaration of homestead. So it protects your equity interest in the property up to $500,000 from third-party creditors. There are exceptions to it. So if you don't pay your mortgage, your property taxes, or your income taxes, you will lose the house to foreclosure. But if you get sued at work or from a car accident, your dog bites a neighbor, whatever it might be, if someone wins a judgment against you in court, you owe them the money. That doesn't go away. But what does go away is that person's right to foreclose on your property or force the sale of your property to satisfy that judgment. So in other words, it protects the roof over your head so long as it's your primary residence. So that's something that we do automatically for every one of our buyers, because under the new statute that changed about 9 years ago, if you record the homestead in writing at the Registry of Deeds, you record it once and it's good as long as you own the property, so you always have that protection. It's the same thing with that owner's title insurance policy. You get it once and it's good as long as you own the property. You refinance it 100 times, you never have to buy that owner's policy again. So it's a one-time fee, it's an annual fee like your homeowner's insurance is. In fact, we actually offer a 10% discount on the title insurance for first-time home buyers. So anyone who's watching this or will be watching this on the recorded version, if they end up using our firm, that's something that our title insurance companies pass along as well. So we're happy to do that as well. And then the last slide is just my contact information. So that's where someone can reach me. We have offices in Worcester and in Boston. I tend to take up residence in the Worcester office, but we have an office at 1 Beacon Street in Boston as well. So that's where you can reach me. Again, I'm happy to answer questions via the chat, or if someone wants to reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to do that and answer anything they might have along the way.
Jim, thank you so much for some awesome information for our people on making sure that they, first of all, have representation. I'm a big fan of buyers being represented because, as I mentioned, most sellers are. And just letting you guys know, like, the process. I'm also a fan of title insurance. It's like scratching against a chalkboard when I hear somebody tell a buyer not to pay for owner's title insurance when they're trying to save on closing costs. Especially like in Massachusetts, I know that there's some kind of issue with foreclosures. And if all those people hadn't purchased title insurance, there are a lot of Massachusetts homeowners who would not have a property, like they wouldn't be able to sell their houses right now if they hadn't purchased that title insurance.
100% right. Yeah, there was a case that came down a few years back that invalidated retroactively certain foreclosure provisions, and things that were done the way they always were done were turned upside down, and then people couldn't sell their houses like they thought they could. They had to wait 3 years for the title to fully vest. So it upended the industry, that's for sure.
All right, awesome stuff. Jim Kahn, thanks for joining us.
Thank you as always, Stacy. I appreciate it. Thanks for everyone out there. Good luck.
And then last but certainly not least, we have our friends from Humboldt Moving and Storage. Howard, you there?
I'm coming in.
Oh, there you are.
Batting cleanup.
What's
right?
that?
Batting cleanup.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us today just to talk about like, what is the process for moving, and any advice you have for people, like, on what is the process of finding a great mover? Or maybe we have no further to go. We found him tonight.
Yeah, right, exactly. I hope so anyway. Yeah, so thank you for having me. And I know this is the most exciting part of the presentation, talking about moving. So let me just share a couple of things with the participants. I've been doing this for 40 years, third generation family business, started in 1905 by my grandfather. So I've been around the block a couple of times in a moving truck. And one thing I know, I'm not delusional, is that people get excited about buying a house and getting the big flat screen TV and the nice outdoor yard, but they don't get excited about paying for a mover. But it's important to talk about what the requirements are for picking a mover, because one of the things we did 10 years ago when we rebranded the company, and you'll see our logo down there, it's Relax and Get Moving. We did focus groups, and lo and behold, what did we find out? Besides death and taxes, moving was one of the most stressful things for people. And it's not just about the move itself. Remember that we're at the end of the process. So you've had your home inspection, you've had your purchase and sale and your negotiation for your property, and you've had to deal with your kids and moving utilities and mail, and then all of a sudden you got to move. So it's the last part of the funnel, and so people they're stressed out. And the job of a good moving company is to help you relax and get through the process and make sure you get from point A to point B with all your belongings intact in the same condition as you started, at a reasonable and professional price. So that's what we're going to talk.
By the way, can you just talk about, like, one of the reasons I wanted to have a professional mover on is because there's a million moving companies. Like, really anybody can just decide tonight they want to be a mover and hang a shingle. And how does a first-time buyer protect themselves from hiring somebody who might not be insured? Or, I mean, we don't know what you're hiring, really.
It's a great question, and that's where I was going. I should bring you on the road with me when I do these presentations. So, one of my favorite phrases is, three schmucks in a truck, and that's what I call inferior competition. So there are a lot of fly-by-night movers. They get a truck, they throw a couple of guys on, and they do moves, and they come and go. And people are enticed with the internet, and they're enticed with, just moving companies that have very low prices. But like everything else in life, you get what you pay for. That doesn't mean you have to choose the most expensive mover, but you really have to be careful, because Stacy, you're right. Anybody can go out and say they're a professional mover with a truck and those guys. But, when you get to the other end and things are missing or broken or whatever, you'll have a different experience. So let's quickly walk through this, because I don't want to, being at the end of the presentation, I don't want to drag things off. But, you've done everything else. You've realized that your back and your friends aren't going to handle a move, and you're going to have to hire a professional. So what do? What I wouldn't recommend doing is exactly what I just talked about, is just going on the internet and trying to find the cheapest price and think that you've got it made, or picking a company out of Florida that's got a base down there that has no equipment, and they're just a broker, and letting them do your move, and then you don't know who's handling your thing. So you got to do a little research, and you have to understand what you're paying for. And like everything else, like Stacy and the lawyer and the mortgage specialist talked about, you need things in writing. You want to have something where you know what you're paying for, and it's written down, so you're prepared for that. And in the old days, you used to go to the yellow pages. So now you can go to the internet. But one of the things that I recommend is ask family and friends for recommendation. Find out any horror stories that might have happened out there and avoid those. Create a prioritized list of movers. You can look up movers on the American Moving and Storage Association, and a shameless advertisement here. Humboldt Storage and Moving, my company, was chosen as the 2018 American Moving and Storage Association Mover of the Year, and that's out of 10,000 movers throughout the country. But that's certainly a good resource. Better Business Bureau, and check reviews and complaints. Another thing, we get a lot of referrals from real estate brokers because they know we're going to do the right thing. So you can talk to your broker. I mean, I love real estate brokers today because I think they're your best friend in a transaction, because they're there to help you make sure you have not only buy a great house, but have a great experience and find professionals that can help you, as Stacy's doing now. Now, things have changed. You always want to get an estimate. You know, people want to kind of bypass that and just get some price, but that's where problems happen in a move. You read about people who got the, $1,000 estimate, and then the move came and the movers held their stuff on the truck and they owed $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 because they gave them some ridiculous price. And that's pretty stressful, especially when you can't get a lot of help from the police department or anything else. So you don't want to be in that situation. You want to get either an in-home estimate or something over the internet, which is becoming much more common. We do virtual surveys, and basically what we do is we ask you to download onto your smartphone a really easy program, and you walk through your house and we kind of talk you through it. So that gives us a video recording of what you have. You also get to see it, and from that we can give you pricing. Now, I happen to prefer in-home because I love people, I love meeting people, but with the coronavirus right now and the limits on people interacting with people, we've pretty much gone completely virtual. And like I said, we have this great program, and that's probably going to change, just like Amazon changed things to one-day delivery expectations. It's going to probably be the expectation going in that you'll do a video survey. But if you can get somebody to come through your home and walk through with you, especially when this virus leaves us, hopefully, it's a good way to do it. And make sure you explain what you need versus what you expect from the moving company. So one way you're going to save money on a move is the more packing that you can do, the better for you. And I'll talk about that a little more when we get through it. But those are the kind of things you want to think about. We do a lot of corporate moves, and those are really nice because when we go into a house, all they want us to do is take care of everything. They go sit in the corner and they go, hey, pack us, load us, deliver us. We're not paying for it. Our company is. Take care of it. But when you're paying for this, like everything else, I mean, obviously you want to be as frugal as you can with the move process. So whatever packing and items you can move yourself is going to save you money as you go. And one of the nice parts of getting a professional to do either a video or a home survey is you can talk through what you want to do versus what you want the moving company to do. I was just on the phone. Again, I couldn't go in and do the survey, but I'm moving a fashion studio, really, really high end. And she's got tons and tons of clothes, and she's got stacks of things. She's been there for about 10, 15 years, highly successful fashion designer. And she hadn't moved in a while, and she was surprised how much it was going to be because of what she had. So I spent 45 minutes with her talking through what she could do. So she's going to eliminate rolls of cloth that she hasn't used, and she's going to go through and purge. And moving's a great opportunity to get rid of things. And as I said to her, if you open up a drawer and you've got something you haven't touched in 3 or 4 years, I think it's time to get rid of it. So she'll probably fill a couple of dumpsters worth, and she'll lessen the cost of the move. The other thing you can do is if you're moving within the state and it's not a far move, you can take your pictures, you can take some of your breakables, and you can move them over in your car as long as you pack it right and move it in, and you can save the cost of packing. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but the most important part of this slide is make sure you get a thorough estimate so you're not surprised at the other end. And I like to be conservative with my estimates, and I tell people that. I say get 2 or 3 estimates, but let's talk afterwards, because I'm not going to try and underprice your move to get the move and surprise you on the other end. So you want to be really careful about that. Let's go to the next. Just get up my slide here. There we go. So we talked about doing your research. Oh, we're back. There we go. Sorry, guys. All right, so get 3 quotes. I wouldn't ask for more. In fact, if I go into a house and somebody's telling me they've got 7 estimates or 8 estimates, and I see a little line out the door where next one's coming in, I'll tell them, look, let me do you a favor. I'm just going to back out of this, and you get your 6 or 7 quotes and good luck to you. And I do that only because you don't want to confuse this process. It's not complex. It's a law of physics. We're taking your items from point A and we're bringing them to point B. And if you get 7, 8, 10 estimates, I mean, you're going to get yourself all crazed. 3 estimates from reputable movers are going to be enough. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to compare, because if you've got 2 estimates that, let's say, are $4,000 for your move and one of them is $1,500, I'd be really suspicious of that quote, and I'd want to talk to that estimator and say, what'd you see that the other 2 people didn't see? Why is yours so much less? Or on the other hand, if you've got 2 at 4,000 and somebody comes in at 8 or 9,000, you certainly want to ask the same question in the other way. Why are you so much more expensive? What did you see? And sometimes there's a reason. You know, we do a lot of high-end moves, and again, I'm conservative, and we'll create some objects that I know would be hard to replace if they got damaged. And some people don't do that, and it's, you know, it's a roll of the dice. You know, if things arrive in good condition and you didn't create it and you didn't pay for that, you're high-fiving yourself. But if the item gets there and damaged, you're gonna wish you had done it, handled it differently. So get your 3 quotes, and then, you know, I tell people all the time, again, moving can, you know, if you haven't moved in a while, you have no idea how much it's going to cost. It might be a little shock to your system, or it just may be confusing. So I tell people, look, get your other estimates, and then let's talk when you're done, and let's compare apples to apples and see, you know, how I can help you make a decision. Customer references we talked about. I mean, that's pretty obvious, but you know, if you know people that have moved recently, it's great to get their feedback. You know, and if I talk to somebody and they go, hey, I got this other mover highly referred and I'm pretty comfortable with them, I'll say, then, you know, you got to be comfortable. Like I said, it's a stressful process. So do what you want, but there's lots of online resources. And again, your real estate broker, I think, is one of the better sources too. Packing is something I talk to customers all the time. Again, if you're not that lucky national account moving person whose company's paying for everything, packing can be as expensive sometimes as moving. And the reason is it's all labor based, if you think about it, and then materials, you got paper, you got boxes. And I tell people, look, if you've got time, you know, if you're moving in 3 days, you're not going to do your own packing. But if you're not moving for a month or 2, and maybe you're not working full time, or you have weekends, or you have older kids in your family, or you're just really good with your hands, why not do some of your own packing? Now, I recommend you don't pack high value items and breakables, because we're insured for everything we pack. We own it. So if we pack it and it gets broken, we own it. If you pack a high value item and it's what we call pack by owner, and it gets damaged on the other end, and there's no damage to the carton, and we open it up and it's apparent that you packed it wrong, the valuation will not be covered. So I tell people, if you have high value items and you're not going to move them over yourself, let us pack that. But you can certainly pack, you know, not expensive dishes, plastics, toys, books, clothing, you know, all that stuff. If you have time, pack it and have it ready to go, and it's going to save you a decent amount of money. Because again, you think about all the labor that, you know, a typical house will send in 3 movers for a day to pack. And, you know, you're talking 1,000, 1,500 sometimes just for the packing experience. So do as much packing as you can. If you pack your belongings, you know, just know that you're responsible for them. But most people are pretty practical, and they've done this rodeo before, and they do a really good job. We don't have a lot of damage unless somebody tries to pack a sculpture or a high value crystal item and they just didn't do it right and it gets broken. And one tip, and I'll move on, put the heaviest items down below. And when you're packing dishes and china, stand them up. Don't put them flat. Think about an egg. If you put an egg flat and you put your hand down on it, it'll splatter in all the directions. If you stand it up straight and hit it from the top, it'll take the force and it won't break. And it's the same thing with packing dishes and china. And you want to go heavy before you go light on top, and you kind of tear it up. So that's your moving tip of the day. Beware of extra or hidden fees. Boy, you know, as an old-time mover, third-generation family guy, that drives me crazy. You know, I don't like when people get fooled into choosing a mover because they think the price is great, and then they get there and they go, oh, we didn't know you had stairs, or we couldn't park the truck close, or we have to transfer it to a smaller truck. You know, you didn't tell us about this, and next thing you know, your estimate's doubled, and you're kind of trapped because you got to get your stuff and you got to move on with your life. So when I told you to get the 3 estimates and get it in writing, make sure everything's spelled out. And here's a nice part about getting a couple of other estimates. You'll be able to compare. And so if one estimate has a fee that the others don't have, it gives you an opportunity to say, why is nobody else charging me this and you are? And maybe that estimator was right and the other 2 were wrong, and then you go back and say, geez, you didn't charge me for this. I'm concerned that your price is lower, but I'm going to have to pay this afterwards. And trust me, I see this all the time. And I find it disconcerting because I try and really give people the pricing that I think is going to be, just because I don't want you to be surprised negatively. Blank moving contracts, I don't like. Sometimes you get paperwork, it has nothing on it. I mean, you want everything on it. What you should get, so we have a customer service department and we do everything in advance. So you'll get all your paperwork, all your contracts when it's signed in advance, and you'll have a chance to review everything. Just make sure if you use a mover that they give you all that in advance. So again, you don't get to destination and they start saying, well, you didn't tell us about this, or here's an extra charge that, you know, and then you're stuck. So the other thing is, when we do a local move, we don't normally do an inventory, and here's why. Your stuff, your items are going on our truck and they're coming off our truck at destination. Nobody else is going to be on that truck. So actual doing an inventory where you write the condition and the pieces takes time. You're paying by the hour. It costs money. So we, like you, trust that you just saw us put it on the truck. You have a good idea what the condition is, and you're going to see us take it off the truck, and you'll know at destination if anything's missing. If you're moving interstate, over state lines, then you're going to want an inventory because your shipment may or may not go on that same truck and may get transferred. So you want to control it so at destination you can make sure you got everything and it's in the condition you want it. But on a local move, you don't need to do that. The other thing you want to make sure of is you get your dates in writing, what you don't want to do. And it's not so much a problem now. Like Stacy and anybody in the real estate business, this is a slower time. It would normally be picking up into starting to get into peak season. In the wintertime, there's no real demand on moving companies. We've got plenty of equipment and guys, but in the summertime, as you all know, it gets really busy. And when does everybody want to move? The end of June, July, August, and September, you know, get the kids back to school, they're getting out of school, and it becomes a really busy time for us. And so what happens with a lot of these smaller, again, 3 schmucks in a truck movers, is they'll overbook. They don't have the staff and facilities, and now it's June 30th and they're supposed to move you out, and guess what? You know, oh, we can't get there, or, you know, we're overbooked, or they get there at 7 o'clock at night, and that's no fun for everybody. And I can't tell you the number of calls we get saying, can you move us? Our mover didn't show up. So make sure you get the dates in writing and that you're covered in that respect. Ensure the value. Oh yeah, I want to get over valuation, and then, oops, I'm way ahead of myself. Sorry, guys, ladies and gentlemen. So here we are. All right, so let me just move you down, get you to here. You know, we do 3,000 moves a year, and I wish I could stay in here and tell you that we never damaged anything and never had a claim. It's going to happen. It's people moving people. You know, some items just, you know, from years of use are in not great condition. IKEA furniture is a nightmare to move. It's a one-time application, and, you know, we have to move it for people, and we got to be really careful because it doesn't always go back the way it came out of the box. But so you're going to have claims, and that's another reason you want to use a really reputable mover. For instance, with Humboldt, we have a full-time claims department, and it's not because we have more claims than anybody else. We just want to take care of our customer because we live off of referrals. And we know if you had a pretty good move, but there's damage that hasn't been taken care of, you're not going to refer us, and it's probably going to taint the move experience for you. So we want to have that. We also have in-house, part of our Mind's Eye division, we have a full-time furniture craftsman, and we can send Jerome out. If we do damage, let's say we knock a leg off a chair or we damage a wall, Jerome can be there the next day to repair any damage and make you very happy. So you want to make sure that, you know, you have 9 months in the state of Massachusetts to file. I'm sorry, it's 6 months in the state of Massachusetts. It's 9 months if you're moving interstate, but you have 6 months to file a claim. So you want to make sure you're on top of that. And the most important thing you can do is on delivery. You want to make sure you're checking, and it's hectic. You got 3 or 4, you know, movers bringing items in. There's different parts of the house. They got questions. You're trying to figure out your floor plan. The more organized you are, the better. So if you see any damage, you want to write it on the paperwork and point it out to the crew. And if you see a box that might have been crushed, or it looks like, you know, there could be some potential damage inside, you want to open that box up while the movers are there. Now, that doesn't mean you can't file a claim afterwards, but my experience has been it's always best if you can point this out. And we'll have paperwork come back on some of my jobs, and I'll see it right on the paperwork where it says, you know, chair leg broken, signed by the customer, and we immediately send that to our claims department, and hopefully within the next couple of days, we'll be on that and we'll be contacting you. So just note any problems on the bill of lading before signing. Do not let a mover bully you into paying extra if you don't feel you should. You know, what you ask them to do at that point is you don't get into any kind of situation with the movers. You ask them to call their office and you talk to their office. So don't let them do that. And the other thing that I can't tolerate, and I won't tolerate with my crew, is movers asking for a tip. I mean, look, it's your discretion. People ask me all the time, and my feeling is you're paying good money for a move. Now, certainly we all like to reward people who've done a good job for us, and when we appreciate that, you know, the hard work, and moving is not easy. As my father used to say, you don't get Harvard graduates to do moving. So if you want to tip the movers or pay for lunch or something like that, it's greatly appreciated by them. You don't have to go crazy. $10 or $20 is good, but never do I want any of my crew or any other movers saying, hey, you got to give us a tip. It's going to make you uncomfortable, and it's going to change the whole experience. So be aware of that. Don't let that happen. And the last thing, you know, again, nobody wants to spend extra money. You know, insurance, valuation, whatever you want to call it, just like in life, you know, if you had a $500,000 house, you wouldn't insure it for $2 million. It's the same thing with your items. Don't go crazy. Maybe you have $200,000 worth of items, but I tell people, unless you're really worried about us, we're not going to damage $200,000 worth of stuff. So usually on a local move, I'll tell people to insure by their highest value piece, maybe ×2. So if you've got a painting that's maybe worth $15,000, you probably want to have at least $30,000 valuation. If you have a lot of really high-end stuff, you might want to go to $50,000 or $75,000. But if you put $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 valuation on it, you're paying an insurance company a lot of money for a claim you probably won't need. I will not do a move unless we have high value protection, and our minimum is $10,000. It costs $100 for the valuation, and it's well worth it. You don't have to. You can go at 60 cents a pound, which is the release value in Massachusetts, but I wouldn't recommend that because you want to know that you have protection, and you don't want depreciated coverage, which is cheaper. And it sounds tempting, but you want full replacement valuation. So for instance, you have a 5-year-old flat screen TV and it gets dropped while it's being moved. With depreciated coverage, you would get the 5-year TV minus 5 years of value. So let's say it cost you $900, you might get $200 or $300 for it. In the same instance, if you had full replacement valuation protection and that TV was broken, you'd get a brand new TV for the $900. And if we damage a piece of furniture, we have the option to fix it to its previous condition, and that's part of the full replacement. But if we repair it and you're not happy, which doesn't happen very often, we will replace that piece. So you want to just have full replacement, and you want to have a reasonable amount of valuation so you're comfortable. And then the last, I'm just going to show you a few slides about Humboldt. You know, we're a United Van Lines agent. We do fine art and antiquities. We have kids program. We have concierge services. And I'm just showing this to show you what a really professional mover who has equipment, warehousing, financial strength to help you. So these are the kind of things we offer: local, long distance, international. We have climate controlled storage. We do warehousing and logistics, residential, corporate, international. And we have a state-of-the-art warehouse, 120,000 square feet. We keep it clean and neat. I wish I could take every one of my clients through, but people don't have time. But it gives you a good sense when you know a mover is taking care. If you have time to go by their facility or you've seen their trucks, you can tell what kind of mover they are by how they keep their equipment, if their crews are in uniform, if their warehouse is clean and neat and, relatively new. You don't want to go into some of these facilities I've seen where it's humid and dirty and, so those are the kind of things you want, especially if you're going to store with somebody. So keep that in mind. We're one of the only movers in the state that has true fine art and climatic control storage. We have steel reinforced vaults and, poured concrete and rebar and all kinds of security protection. So we can certainly offer that. And then, we offer a stress-free guarantee. Another thing to ask other movers, if you're not happy with any one of our crews, you can call us and say, I didn't like Len. I really don't think I should pay for him. And we will deduct that from your move cost. Now, knock on wood, that doesn't happen a lot. We'd be in big trouble. So but we have it there because we know how good our crews are and we want you to be happy. So, in 115 years of experience, there are second and third generation movers out there and they're there for a reason. They've done things right. So you want to look at that too. So that's what I got, I think. Let me just see my last phone. Yep. Thank you.
I have a question for you. Something I've always wondered. Is the pricing for a move based on demand? Like, for example, if I close the second week of June, am I going to get a better price than like June 30th? Or is it the same regardless of when you...
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm telling you, I got to take you with me. That's a great question. So what happens is... You go ahead.
No.
Yeah, so like... Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I had a little instability there. What happens is just like in the real estate business where it's seasonal. I mean, people buy houses in the winter and in the fall, but really when the kids get out of school and the weather gets better, people move. And we have the most demand. So let's say we're putting out 20, 25 jobs a day in the wintertime. In the summertime, we can go to 40, 50, sometimes 60, just because of the demand that comes in. Don't forget, we're moving national accounts. We're moving, people locally. We've got international move assignments coming in. So it gets really, really busy. So what happens is, like an airline, our tariff fluctuates with demand. So in the wintertime, that's the best time to move because we're in our non-peak rates. Mm-hmm. But if you get into the summertime, our rates are going to get higher. And that's a great example. The middle of June is not going to be as expensive as the end of June. Because here's what happens. We can handle most of the work mid-week in mid-month in the summer, but the June 30th, we turn jobs away. I mean, we literally, you get moved by us at the end of June if you're a realtor connection and been referred, or you're a national account, or you're a previous customer. But we get people calling up saying, "Oh, you got to move me," and we're like, "We can't do it." Mm-hmm. We've already got 50 jobs on the book, and it's kind of like the contractor that tries to build too many houses and they can't do the service right. Mm-hmm. If we overbook, we can't take care of our clients. So we typically will charge a premium, like every other mover, but you'll also get the service that you paid for.
Awesome. Thank you so much for teaching us so much about moving tonight.
You're welcome. And good luck, everybody. Let's hope the market gets going soon.
Absolutely. So that is Howard Goldman from Humboldt Storage and Moving. So with that, we are at the end of tonight's first virtual first-time homebuyer program. I want to say thank you to all of our panelists from Ross Mortgage, Citizens Bank, Humboldt, Tiger Home Inspection, and Army and Roach. With that, I invite everybody that watched tonight to reach out to your Lair real estate agent And if you have any questions, they can help guide you through your move, whether you're buying or selling. We have the best agents in the business. And for anybody that watched tonight's program, we will follow up and send you a recording of tonight's program in case you want to be in touch with any of our awesome panelists from this evening. With that, we wish you so much luck in the purchase of your first home, and we hope that you found the information tonight helpful in making a smooth move. Thanks, everyone, and have a great buying experience. Thanks.